I was born in a little town called Hope, Arkansas, 3 months after my father died. I remember living in that old two-story house where I lived with my grandparents. I remember going to my grandfather's grocery store, and a big jar of Jackson cookies that were there on the shelf. It was a wonderful little small town where, you know, it seemed that everybody knew everybody else. And it was just segregated like all southern towns were then. And I remember my grandmother and grandfather opposing the closing of Central High School to keep black students out. They were for integrating the schools. It was interesting. My grandfather had a grade school education. And my grandmother had graduated from high school from a tiny little school out in Bodcaw, Arkansas.
His grandmother just valued education above all else. I mean, from the time Bill was in a high chair, she had, you know, like playing cards tacked up on the drapes in the kitchen area where she fed Bill, and she would tell him what the numbers were, and she would read to him all the time, so that, you know, he was able to read at a really young age, in part because his grandmother valued it so much and helped him so much.
They didn't go around and see the world and become broad-minded. They did it out of the depths of their experience and their heart. And I was always really proud of them.
On August the 18th, 1946, I walked to the Malco Theater in downtown Hope to see a picture called Tomorrow is Forever. And it must have been prophetic because the next day, Bill was born. You know, when you lose your husband, you never ever think you're going to get married again, never. And I kept looking at this child and didn't feel that I was going to be able to earn enough money.
She went back to New Orleans to finish her nursing education. She became a nurse anesthetist. And it was, you know, tough for her to leave me. And during this time she was away, one time my grandmother and I went down on a train to visit her. I remember we pulled out of the station and my mother kneeled at the side of the track and cried because she felt so bad that I was leaving. It's one of my most vivid memories of childhood.
Some people think that Bill must have been born wealthy and raised wealthy, you know, that he had all of the privileges that you could ever imagine. Well, you know, instead of being born with a silver spoon in his mouth, he was really born into a house that had an outhouse in the backyard.
My stepfather, as you know, we had some problems growing up, but he was very good to me.
Roger Clinton was an alcoholic, a good man, and if he ever loved anything in this world, it was Bill.
When I was in the 9th grade, I think he got violent with my mother one night, and I just bulled through the door and told him he wasn't going to do that anymore. I just said,
"Stand up, I have something to say to you." And obviously he couldn't stand up. And so he got in his face and he said, "Daddy, if you're not able to stand up, I'll help you. You must stand to hear what I have to say." And some way or other he stood. And Bill told him then, "Don't you ever, ever lay your hand on my mother again."
I never stopped loving my stepfather or thinking he was a really good person. And later on, I wish I'd known more about human psychology as a child than I did, because I came to realize that he was a good person and that the problem was not that he didn't love my mother or me or my brother. The problem was that he didn't think enough of himself.
My brother took over the leadership role in our family when he was just a kid. In old pictures, it seems like he always had his arm around me. When I was first starting school at the age of 5 or 6, he went down to the courthouse and had his last name changed to the same as mine. You know, I have to smile when I hear my brother say in the campaign that we have to be one country, because that's the way he's always felt about our family. Religion was really important, and church going was really important to the two of us. He loved singing the hymns and the gospel music, and even to this day, it's an extremely significant part of his life.
Bill was always interested in current events. One morning, he couldn't have been more than 7 years old. He read where Arkansas was on the bottom in education. He remarked to me at the time, "Did you know if Arkansas will let me, one of these days I'm going to get us off the bottom?" Well, you know, you don't pay a lot of attention to a child saying something like that.
It was in July of 1963 that I went to Washington and met President Kennedy at the Boys Nation program. And he came out and, you know, made a few little comments. We were all standing there in alphabetical order, so Arkansas was near the front of the line, and I was the biggest kid there. So I made sure that I got to shake hands with him. And I remember just thinking what an incredible country this was, that somebody like me who came from a little town in Arkansas who, you know, had no money, no political position or anything, would be given the opportunity to meet the president.
When he came home from Boys Nation with this picture of John Kennedy and himself shaking hands, I've never seen such an expression on a man's face in my life. He just had such pride. And I knew then that government, in some form, would be his goal.
I was raised in a time when mothers would say they hoped their children would grow up to be president. I was raised to believe in this country, to believe in this system, to believe that elections were good things that gave people a chance to have their say and change the course of events.
One of my earliest memories is of my brother reciting Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech by heart from beginning to end.
It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream.
It's the greatest political speech of my lifetime. It was so powerful, it was so true, it was so moving, it was such a wake-up call for the country. I was heartbroken when Martin Luther King died. Washington burned, I was in school there then, I drove supplies down into the burned out part of the cities. It was a terrible time. And it just broke the hearts and spirits of millions of people. It was only 2 months later when Robert Kennedy was killed. You know, those two deaths, they changed a lot of things for my generation, and for this country. And if both of them had lived, I think the last 20 years would have been a lot different for America and much better.
The first time I ever saw Bill Clinton, he was standing in the hallway outside the law library at Yale, which is this wonderful Gothic structure, and he was surrounded by all of these fellow classmates who were trying to convince him to be on the Yale Law Journal.
I said, look, I'm going home to Arkansas, and I'm not going to get a big Wall Street job. I'm not going to go clerk on the Supreme Court. I'm going home, be a country lawyer. I don't know if I want to be on the Law Journal.
And he was listening politely, but he was watching me because I was watching him, because I was in the law library at this long table studying, and I finally thought, this is, you know, kind of silly.
And finally, she just put down the book she was reading and walked the entire length of the law library and walked up to me and she said,
if you're going to keep looking at me and I'm going to keep looking back, we at least ought to know each other, and I'm Hillary Rodham.
What's your name? Well, I couldn't remember my name.
I mean, I thought that he was great looking and he was fun, and he was just somebody who challenged and made you happy all the time. I've just never met anybody like Bill.
She came to Arkansas, and we were driving around one day together, and we drove past this beautiful old house, and she talked about what a pretty house it was. There was a for sale sign in front of it. And I remember she went away somewhere, and I picked her up at the airport, and I drove her back, and I said, you know, I bought that house you liked. She said, what? I said, that house you like, I bought it, so you better marry me because I can't live in this big house by myself. And that's when she finally said yes.
I think they deeply love and are committed to one another. And then they have the kind of, I don't know, what I like to call synergy. I mean, there's, you know, the combination of the two of them makes a third element that is just irresistible as far as I can see.
Bill's becoming a father and having Chelsea was one of the, you know, really great experiences of his life, because it was something his own father never got to do, you know, never got to see his own child.
I was there when Chelsea was born, and it was still, I guess, the most incredible thing I've ever been through. You know, I still remember how squunched up she was when she came out. I still remember how profoundly grateful I was that, you know, Hillary was okay and that I had lived to see it. I mean, I was very aware at that moment that that's something that my father hadn't done.
He would just sit for hours and look at his daughter, you know, trying to take in this miracle. But then he would do things that just would knock me out. I mean, I remember one day when Chelsea was like 3 months old, she was learning to roll over, and I was in another room, and he was watching her on the bed in our bedroom, and he yells at me, tells me to come in quick, and he says, look at this. And I thought he was going to tell me she was rolling over, which, of course, I knew, which I thought was sweet of him. But no, he was going to tell me, look at this. She rolls over the edge of the bed, and then she rolls back. She must understand gravity. And I said, oh, right. You know, and about 20 minutes later, I hear this plunk as my daughter unlearns gravity, right?
Sometimes my dad, to make me laugh, makes like funny faces, or he'll make funny sounds. And when I was little, when I would squeeze his nose, he would talk in a really weird voice. Whenever I play softball, that sometimes embarrassed me by jumping up and yelling and waving his hands, and sometimes he'll come over and talk to me during the game, but that's okay. What I would like America to know about my mother and father is that they're great people and they're great parents. They taught me that I had to think for myself, and they taught me to treat other people how you would want to be treated and follow the golden rule.
Once early in the campaign, when I'd been beat up a lot by the press, and Hillary and I went on national television and basically acknowledged that we'd had some problems in our marriage, and we were proud of the fact that we'd been able to keep it together. When the show aired, Chelsea wanted to watch it, so the three of us went upstairs and sat down and watched it together. It was pretty painful, you know, to have your child watch that. And after it was over, I looked at her and I said, what do you think? And she said, I think I'm glad you're my parents. And after that, I knew whatever happened, it'd be all right.
When the history of this campaign is written, they may say, well, Bill Clinton took a lot of hits in this campaign. I want you to know something. The hits that I took in this election are nothing compared to the hits that the people of this state and this country are taking every day of their lives under this administration. We no longer can have a country where I worry about me, you worry about you, they worry about them. That's the kind of country the Republicans have given us for more than a decade. We've got to be one country again, going up or down, together again.
Sometimes, late at night on the campaign plane, I'll look out the window and think how far I am from that little town in Arkansas. And yet, in many ways, I know that all I am or ever will be came from there. A place and a time when nobody locked their doors at night, everybody showed up for a parade on Main Street, and kids like me could dream of being part of something bigger than themselves. I guess there'll always be a sadness in me that I never heard the sound of my father's voice or felt his hand around mine. But all of us have sadness and disappointment in our lives, and hopefully we grow stronger for it. I know every day that I'm alive, I hope I'm a better person than the day before. I hope that every day from this day forward, we can be a nation coming together instead of coming apart. And I hope that we as a people will always acknowledge that each child in our country is as important as our own. I still believe these things are possible. I still believe in the promise of America. And I still believe in a place called hope.